Hello and welcome to today's video. Today's video is the results for the Monthly Mashup Challenge for September 2019. And you can see by the title down below, I think, it is going to be a Steampunk Ursula. If you want to check out my other Monthly Mashup Challenge videos, you can check the playlist down below. Also, next month, October 2019, I am doing 31 Days of Halloween, and I will have a special Halloween themed monthly mashup. All right, let's get started. I have all of my supplies ready. This time I've got a few different items here. I have a bunch of wire, of course my clay, my foil, my reference picture, my tools, and then I have a bunch of little gears that I got at Hobby Lobby that I want to incorporate somewhere in this sculpture. Because of the complexity of this sculpture, I decided I'm going to do it in 3 different sessions. So I'll bake it after each session. To start off, I wanted to create the base with 6 wires that would be the support for the tentacles. And after I did this, I kind of, did the old hit myself in the head type thing, because I think I could have used 3 longer wires and had them go straight through, and they actually would have been sturdier and it would have been a lot easier. But this was pretty tricky to get these wires to stay in place. And then I covered it with more foil and then started adding the clay. But, long story short, I did get it to work. I know now it's not the easiest way to do it, but it did work, so we'll just continue on. So what I wanted to have done on this stage was have the base, the lower section of her covered, and then I wanted to do a little start of the tentacle. And the tentacles are going to be segmented, so that way it'll have some gold, and then it'll go to a black for a joint, and then more gold, and keep going. So I got this portion done, and then I'm going to go ahead and bake this. That way it's nice and solid. Now it's time to bake our clay. Remember, always bake your clay according to package instructions. Now with that lower portion baked there on the left, I don't have to worry about messing up any of that sculpture as I attach the tentacles to it. So I started off, I'm going to roll out 6 separate tentacles, and then when I had most of them done, I decided they don't look quite thick enough. And so I went ahead and redid them thicker, and then I'm going to go through and cut them into segments, and that way I want it to look like kind of this robotic arm that has these joints in it. So like they're not going to move at their metal gold part, they're going to move at the joint only, because it's a robotic tentacle and not a real tentacle. I didn't want it to look too organic, since it's supposed to be this steampunk robot thing. So each tentacle I wanted to make sure they were in a different pose, because I wanted to have still, even though it's not organic, I wanted to have some motion to it, and to show that these tentacles would move independently of each other, so they would be in different positions on, coming out of her body. So basically what I did is I took some black clay and put it up against the base, and then did a section of the gold clay, and then put another piece of black clay. And at each section, before I'd put the black clay on, or right after, depending on where I was at, I would bend the wire a little bit. I didn't want to bend it before, because I didn't want to have to take that clay and try to maneuver it around the bend. But if I bent it afterwards, then I could slide it on and it would stay in place. Once this was all done, a couple of the tentacles feel a little loose, but they're not going to come off because of that clay capping it at the end. So it's really not a problem. I just would prefer it to be a little more stable, but it worked out well. So with that done, I'm going to go ahead and make kind of like a little window that you'd be looking inside of her, seeing some of her gears and stuff that would, help run the robot. So I started off with some black clay, put some gears on it. Then I wanted it to match up with the rest of her, so I outlined that with some gold clay. And then I wanted to seal it off because I wanted to put some liquid clay in there. So I pushed that up against it and then did some detail work on it. And then I went ahead and took some liquid Sculpey. It's translucent, so I'm hoping when it bakes you can see those gears. And went ahead and covered the gears up with that. So I'm going to go ahead and bake this section. So it'll be our second baking session for Ursula. And then I will work on the rest of her body. So I'm going to do her upper body, arms, and head. So to start things out, I'm going to cover the rest of the foil with some more gold clay. And then I'm going to go ahead and sculpt kind of a trim, I guess. I don't know, the best way to describe it, but I wanted something to kind of separate that top section, even though I wasn't doing, like how she is in the cartoon, but I still wanted a separation there. So I took a piece of gold clay and then added some indentions to kind of show it riveted, like rivets. And then I went ahead and added the little window. I used some liquid Sculpey to attach it. Now I'm going to work on the arms. Now the arms are done the same way as the tentacles, but I wanted to keep them moving more natural for arms. Like where the tentacles, I wanted them to be in all different directions because tentacles could do that. So I wanted to, restrict myself to doing the natural movements of arms, even though she's a robot and technically, however she's made is what they could, what she'd be able to do. But I wanted her to represent the character. And so I wanted one arm on her hip. A lot of the reference pictures I looked at showed, her arm on her hip or something. It's been a long time since I watched The Little Mermaid, so that's kind of what I went off of. And the other arm I just wanted outstretched. Mainly because I didn't want it blocking the little window of gears. One thing I wanted to make sure to incorporate into the sculpture was her seashell necklace. And I decided to go ahead and use a small chain for it instead of like the rope or thread it was on in the movie, just because I thought this fit the aesthetic of the steampunk sculpture better. And then I'm going to start working on her head. So I took a foil ball and covered it with some gold clay. And then I wanted to make kind of a lower mechanical jaw that would stick out more. This I thought kind of represented where her head shape is kind of a pear because of her like kind of a double chin area. I thought this mechanical jaw would represent that and stick out more. And now for her eyes, I decided to use some pearl beads. And then I thought they were too bug-eyed. So I was looking at some reference pictures and noticed she, kind of has this squint a lot. So I decided to add some more gold clay on top of those pearl beads. And that way I could kind of have these angled eyes that looked a little more menacing. And then I didn't think she looked quite, feminine enough because this is just this weird robot head. I decided to add some eyelashes. I don't really know in this universe that this thing exists if they would be painted on or what they would be, but I decided to go ahead and just add them. Now for the last thing I need to do is I want to sculpt some areas for what I'm going to call little steam vents for the top of her head. I thought it would work to do these and then have some wool roving coming out of it to represent the steam that would be released from the robot. Alright, we'll go ahead and bake it one last time and get it finished up. So my very last step is I'm just taking some white wool roving, taking a little bit of super glue gel, putting it on the end of this toothpick, kind of inserting it into those holes and then using the toothpick to press the wool roving into those holes to give the steam effect. Now I'm just going to let that glue dry for a little bit. We'll take a look at the final piece. And here is the finished Steampunk Ursula. So I hope you really enjoyed today's mashup. I had a lot of fun making her. There's also a little bit of stress, and by a little bit I mean a lot, but that's okay. It happens. I honestly, when I started making her, I wasn't sure what route I was going to go, and I ended up going with the thought process that if Ursula was in the steampunk world, she wouldn't be an organic creature. And from what I've seen in steampunk, a lot of creatures, or creature type things, are all mechanical. They're all robotic. And so I played with the idea of doing her like half robotic, like she, sat down in these robotic tentacles. But then I thought it would be cool to do her kind of all robotic, And so I even, like I was showing in the making, but so there's a little kind of window showing some of her gears. And then I thought if she's steam powered, somewhere the steam has to go somewhere. So I thought I'd have these exhaust ports on the top of her head, and it would kind of mimic her hair. Because I didn't want to just do clay hair. I mean, it could be there for cosmetic reasons, not have a purpose. But I thought, to me, it was more interesting to have this be something that would be functional, and I use that wool to kind of represent the steam, coming out of there. So, and I, you saw also on the making, I wanted to make sure to include the little seashell necklace. So that obviously is more of a cosmetic type piece. For the tentacles and the arms, all the limbs, so I figured these pieces are all going to be a metal. And in between, the joints would have some kind of, what do you want to call it? It'd have a joint, but I feel like it'd be covered with something to kind of protect it, especially if she's going to go in the water. So it'd be kind of like a rubber covering over that, and that's what the black would represent. So she'd be able to move around, but she would only be able to move at these jointed areas. So she definitely took a lot more thought in designing her than my other mashups. Like my first mashup, the Iron Turtle, I mean, that was pretty simple. It was just going to be a turtle with Iron Man armor. Zombie Big Bird was, just going to be a zombified, Big Bird character. I also wanted to go ahead and bring in the Voodoo My Little Pony, so you can kind of see a size comparison. She is taller. She just, there's a lot more going on with her, a lot more complex sculpt. But, in the end, I am really happy with how she turned out. I know if I ever made her again, I can probably make her 10 different times. I'm not going to. And have her be completely different, just because I feel like there's so many options with that. As doing some research online, and I found one where the tentacles were in the back. So it's kind of like Doc Ock from Spider-Man. I thought that was a really cool design, and I thought about doing that. But I wasn't for sure how to have her stand and be stable. And most likely I would do a lot of wires and stuff, which, you saw in this, you had a lot of wires. But in the end, I felt like this is something that I could do, and I, wanted to try it in this all robotic version of her. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you like this video, please give it a like down below. Also, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Starting tomorrow, if you're watching this on the day it's posted, I will have my first of 31 days of Halloween videos, so be sure to check those out. So ring the notification bell if you want to get notified when those videos come online. All right, well, thank you so much for watching, and remember, never stop creating. Bye!